Some of you may have heard the terms mass incarceration or prison overcrowding, but did you know that Alaska has the 11th fastest growing prison population in the United States? That's right. According to the 5-year prisoner reentry plan, authored by Department of Corrections Deputy Commissioner Carmen Gutierrez, from 1982 to 2007, Alaska experienced a 152% increase in its prison population. In response to Ms. Gutierrez's report, the Alaska legislature began crafting an act intended to reverse that trend. Alaska Senate Bill 91 is a Criminal Law and Procedures Act, passed in July 2016, which changed the way the state uses incarceration to deter crime. According to the Alaska State press release, this act is a, quote, historic reform of the state's criminal justice system and is projected to reduce the number of prisoners by 13%. Now you may be thinking to yourself, 13%? That doesn't seem very significant. Well, that number represents a reduction of about 750 inmates. And that reduction would save state taxpayers about $102,000 a day or $37,230,000 a year. Before I tell you more about Senate Bill 91, let's go over the 3 things that I'm going to cover today. First, you're going to learn a bit about how a report written in 2011 led to a reevaluation of how the state uses incarceration to deter crime. Then, you're going to learn a bit about Senate Bill 91's creation and how it was based on recommendations that came from that reevaluation. Finally, I'm going to share with you the hope that Senate Bill 91 has established for Alaska's future. But first, let's go back to 2011. Deputy Commissioner stated in her prisoner reentry plan that recommendations within would set forth, quote, new and more effective strategies to reduce prison numbers and make our communities safer. Ultimately, her recommendations focused on one strategy in particular, and that is, quote, exploring alternatives to prison for individuals who have committed nonviolent offenses primarily because of substance abuse and or mental health issues. The main alternative is community-based electronic monitoring while serving sentences under house arrest. Granting access to this type of alternative meant that the state had to change the way that the criminal justice system operates, and doing that requires legislation. In order to bring about that change, Governor Sean Parnell established the Alaska Criminal Justice System Commission in 2014. The mission of this commission, according to the University of Alaska Justice Forum, was to evaluate and make recommendations for, quote, improving criminal justice practices, including rehabilitation and restitution. The commission came to a consensus on a number of recommendations, including focusing prison beds on violent offenders, strengthening parole supervision, and improving reentry programming. As a direct result of the commission's recommendations, changes in the criminal justice system were codified in the form of legislation. Senate Bill 91 is intended to divert people from simply spending time in prison and provide access to resources which improve the likelihood of successful community reintegration. So you may be wondering, how is that working out? What does the prison system look like now? Well, after the passage of Senate Bill 91, the Department of Corrections created the Office of Prisoner Reentry, which has a vision for Alaska's future. And that is that, quote, every returning citizen released from prison will have the tools and support needed to succeed in the community. What does that mean? That means that we are no longer simply locking people in a box and expecting that when they're released, they will know how to succeed. The Office of Prisoner Reentry is staffed with individuals who are tasked with intervening in the lives of people who have committed crimes by investing resources in rehabilitative programming, education, and job training. Today, when an inmate is released from prison, that person has the option of accessing resources that didn't exist just a couple of years ago. Organizations like the Partners Reentry Center and Alaska Native Justice Center serve thousands of returning citizens each year with things like housing, employment, and basic life skills. So what did you learn about today? First, you learned about how a report written in 2011 led to a reevaluation of how the state uses incarceration to deter crime. Then you learned a bit about Senate Bill 91's creation and how it was based on recommendations that came from that reevaluation. Finally, you learned about the hope of Senate Bill 91 and listened to a vision for Alaska's future. Nelson Mandela, former president of South Africa, who himself spent 27 years in prison, once wrote, "It is said that no one truly knows a nation until one has been inside its jails. A nation should not be judged by how it treats its highest citizens, but its lowest ones."